Welcome to Insight. I am Natasha Jha. There has been a definite decline in both perception and experience of citizens about corruption in public services between 2005 and 2017, says the CMS India Corruption Study of 2017. Though the key reasons for paying bribe in a public service remained consistent between 2005 and 2017, indicating that there has been little focus on ground level issues while addressing corruption. Ahead of the third anniversary of the National Democratic Alliance government, a survey has found that both popular perception as well as experience of corruption in public services has declined. The finding of the survey, CMS India Corruption Study 2017, conducted by New Delhi-based think tank Center for Media Studies, which compares corruption in public services between 2005 and 2016, reinforces the government's claim that it has made a dent in graft with its various anti-corruption initiatives. According to the report, 53% of households who experienced corruption in public services at least once in 2005, that percentage has come down to 31% of households who experienced corruption in public services at least once in 2016. 73% of households perceived an increase in corruption level in public services in 2005. The number has come down to 43% of households experiencing increase in corruption levels in public services in 2016. Total amount paid as bribes was 20,500 crore in 2005. This number has drastically come down to 6,350 crore rupees in 2016. The report covers over 3,000 households in rural and urban areas across 20 states. Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu experienced the most corruption in 2016. On the other side, Himachal Pradesh, Kerala and Chhattisgarh experienced the least corruption in 2016. Corruption in public services in 2005 in police services was 74%. It came down to 34% in 2016. In land housing sector, from 65% in 2005, it came down to 24% in 2016. In judicial services, from 66% corruption in 2005, it has come down to 18% in 2016. In tax, 33% in 2005, 15% corruption in 2016. In public distribution, 19% corruption was experienced in 2005. It came down to 12% in 2016. However, the study also indicated that a lot still remained to be done to reduce corruption in public services. Your report. Right, so corruption has become the most effective alternate method of doing things in every field, be it politics, health services, running of schools and colleges, getting license or permits, or planning for the development of the nation. Our focus today is on bribery in the times of poverty. Joining me on the program today, very esteemed guest as of now, is from CMS, Social Director Alok Srivastava. Thanks very much, Mr. Srivastava, for joining us in this program. Questions we are looking at in this particular segment: has this government relatively given a corruption-free administration? How corruption affects the poor? What makes public officials corrupt and inefficient? How corruption comes in the way of our economic development? Is corruption a fact of life in India? What sort of institutional solutions are in place to fight corruption? Former CVC N. Vittal said corruption in India was a low-risk and high-profit activity. So has this government relatively given a corruption-free administration? We try and explore all these answers to all these questions in this particular segment. Joining me on the program now is also political editor of the Deccan Herald, Shekhar Iyer. Thanks very much, Mr. Iyer, for joining us in this program. Starting the program with you, Mr. Srivastava. What was the idea behind this particular survey? You're also the author of CMS India Corruption Study. What was the very idea of doing and initiating the study in the first place?
Actually, as you could see, we started this thing sometime in 2000, and almost every year or alternate year we take up this study where we try to capture, because if you see corruption, there are two types of corruption, one can say. One is petty corruption, where the common citizens or households, when they interact with the public services, they come across kind of difficulties, and to overcome those difficulties they have to pay bribe. So our focus is on these citizens, the common citizens, and we don't look into the petty, the big corruption, big ticket corruptions, one can say, the systemic corruption, where it is related to contracts or procurement. So this is 11th round that we did.
Okay.
And in every round we try to focus on a particular segment of the society. And this time our focus was on rural-urban population in 20 states, covering some 10 public services. Okay. And these 10 public services are very basic and essential for the common citizens.
Okay, now as the report also mentioned, public services, you said police services, land and housing, judicial services, tax, public distribution. So if one compares this between 2005 and 2016, police services 74% to 34%. So do you consider this as substantial decline in corruption if one really has to compare between in the last one decade things have really gone down?
Yeah, definitely, because when we did 2005 study, at that time there was no RTI Act and many Public Services Act, the Guarantee Act was also missing. So these things has definitely, but particularly the media role in terms of sensitizing the community, the civil society organizations who are more active in terms of bringing up the corrupt practices in public services. So these things has been improving the situation in terms of decreasing the corruption level in public services.
Okay. Mr. Iyer, we know that there is latest survey by the CMS and which says that it has actually, the corruption in public services has come down. It also says the total amount paid as bribes, which was 20,500 crore in 2005, has come down to 6,350 crore in 2016. My simple question, has this government relatively given a corruption-free administration?
You see, their report itself is, has a subtitle, Perception and Experience, regarding public services. So I think definitely because of the thrust from the highest level and to make things simpler. See, two things would normally make up for the perceptual issues. One is how the system is. And in the last, 3 years we have seen a very systematic effort to make things simpler. Whether it is passport, whether it is driving license, to make it more simpler.
Right.
But there was a huge systemic, what I would say, a baggage, which refuses to change, because any change is always inconvenient.
Right.
So therefore, if the perception is changing, it's largely because a bigger message has gone out, that not just the obsolete laws, we have seen several laws have been, but also making it simpler for even a simple thing like self-attestation. See, this is done away with the hassles, because normally for students to submit mark sheets, they had to run around finding a gazetted officer, getting it. See, these are little things which make perceptual change. But at the same time, people still feel there are a lot of elements in the system who are somehow, trying to, it's like the mosquitoes. Right. Whatever you do, they keep on reappearing.
Yes, you raise a very pertinent point, perception and experience, what you perceive and what you experience. So we can perceive a corruption-free world, but what we experience is actually the reality. 53% of households experienced corruption in public services at least once in 2005. 31%, this came down to 31%, at least once. They are the ones who experienced corruption in 2016. As far as increase in corruption level in public services is concerned, from 73% in 2005 to 43%. But the report also highlights one major thing, and that is that the key reasons of paying bribe in a public service remained consistent between 2005 and 2016. Does that mean when we talk about addressing the systemic issues, the key reasons remain the same? So overall, the ground situation hasn't really changed in a great way?
One would tend to agree with this view, because what is happening is, even though more, there is also a feeling, more attempts are made to change the system by simplifying rules, by making it easier, and more of this e-governance, applying through electronic means. But there is a feeling that probably at the, the tail end, somewhere you need to give it that, what is called the push, and that push invariably results in, greasing the palm of someone. The last stage. Right. It may be the postman who will come and deliver you the passport.
So the bribery amount must have come down from 20,500 crore in 2005 to 6,350 crore in 2016. But Mr. Srivastava, when you wrote this report, what was the most surprising element for you? What was it which you thought that this is something which defines how corruption has changed in last one decade?
Well, I see that definitely, as everyone is saying, that there is a certain decline in perception and experience, but you also mentioned about the reasons. The key reasons still remain same. So in spite of all the effort that is being made, 1/3 of the citizens that we interacted with and with those who have interacted with these public services have come across experiencing corruption in public services. So which is still surprising, because in spite of the claims of having easy service delivery, e-governance and citizen charter or right to information act in place, we are finding that every third household that interact with a particular service come across experiencing corruption in those.
So that means the element of fear is still lacking in the administration, because we are simultaneously also speaking about judicial services, police cases. You know, there's a huge backlog. More than 3 to 4 crore cases are pending in courts. So the element of fear is missing. Conviction rate is very poor. And as I was quoting earlier, what former CVC has said about the state of corruption, that it was a low risk and high profit activity. When you look at corruption in India, it's a very low risk activity. Nobody is really, going to consider you as a convict, or will, how many bureaucrats for that matter, how many administrators, how many politicians we have seen are held accountable for all the misdeeds they have done?
Yeah, very, very true. And in fact, if you see whatever things are being done from the top, it's not reaching to the block level or to the district level. So the households that are common citizens who are approaching them for different services, even for example, take the PDS, or if they go to the public health center to get medicines, they are not getting it, or they have to pay bribe to get those medicines.
Okay, right. So what for you is surprising element, that even when we talk about digital India, even when we talk about technology, e-governance, reaching at the panchayati level, even after, it's been more than 4 decades since we passed out the panchayati, 73rd and the 74th amendment, and giving rights to the 3rd tier of governance, things haven't really changed on ground, or it will be blatant, overgeneralization, but overall things looks as if it's still very, very murky at the ground level?
Well, I think to a large extent that perception is unavoidable, I would say. But also remember the kind of, I would connect with this perception with the kind of election results we have seen in the recent months and days. That largely because you have at the helm the Prime Minister, who at meeting after meeting, rallies after rallies keeps saying, "Na main khaunga, na khane dunga." I mean, I will not eat, I will not let others eat. See, this message and the ground perception, it gives rise to a kind of a hope that perhaps there is a man at the top who will somehow, means what he says and will do what he means, and finally he will push the system to change. So it may take a year, it may take another year, but at least down the line it's working. And same thing is happening in Uttar Pradesh, where you have a new chief minister. See, because I think the public faith would increase when you have more of this naming and shaming. So will you also agree with that? Will bring about more change. But
the discourse has also changed to quite an extent. We are now talking about corruption. Earlier, nobody was even talking about corruption. It was actually a fact of life. We are as you rightly pointed out about the Prime Minister, who said ki na khaunga na khane dunga. So it generates a lot of hope, and the sort of development paradigm in state like Uttar Pradesh, the way the government actually came back in power with a thumping majority. What does this say about the general side, that people want development, people want efficient administration, good governance, and if a particular party can deliver that, we are there to vote for that party?
I think I'll put it very simply. People down who are at the receiving end, they are plainly fed up, and over the years they have become cynical also. That more promises are made, nothing will happen. And they still feel perhaps when more, even as things change, the more things will remain unchanged. But that will need, more kind of action. And that's only possible, not just with the Prime Minister at the top, but down the line, if every people's representative, whether it's a corporator, whether it's a legislature or a member of parliament, they themselves make it this point. I mean, this is the other dimension, the Swachh Bharat, the other dimension is the clean-up of the system.
Clean up the system, and to start with.
And if that were to give, the people's faith will start rebuilding. And incidentally, whatever the findings are of the CMS, and the public perception or the media perception is almost tallies, even in terms of states.
And interestingly, Bibek Debroy, who released this report yesterday, who's also a Niti Aayog member, said that big ticket corruption is linked with electoral reforms. So simultaneously also bringing reforms in different areas, be it judicial reforms, electoral reforms, police reforms. But what is your assessment of demonetization? Because the report to some extent also talks about demonetization. Do you think the figures, the sort of downslide which we have seen in the people, the way they have responded on corruption? Is it also because of the demonetization impact?
No. In fact, the survey was conducted in October, November, much before the demonetization phase started.
Okay.
And when we talk about with the citizens, we ask about their reference period in the last 12 months.
Okay.
So during 2016 or late 2015, what was their experience or their perception about
Okay, so
corruption?
demonetization has nothing to do with the survey results.
But we did a subsample survey in January, post December 31st, to understand what is their perception again about corruption in public services during this phase of November, December. And at that time, people felt that, yeah, definitely more than half felt that the corruption level has come down, but that is more of a perception, not experience.
Okay, that is more of a perception, not experience, because the final tally is also not out at what actually came out of the demonetization impact, what was launched by the Prime Minister on the November 8th, 2016, and many call it a surgical strike on black money. But how corruption really comes in the way of our economic development? Mr. Iyer, what makes, because all this while, in debate after debate, in surveys after surveys, what really makes public officials corrupt and inefficient? What is the reason? Why are public officials, because when we compare our administration with nations abroad, what is it, why is it that we are considered more corrupt than others?
Because largely because what we are seeing is when major projects or even a minor work, let's say laying of a road or maintenance of a road, the general the impression one gets is, A, the cost of the project is escalated to allow room for these payoffs. B, it seems to be the normal. I mean, nobody is talking of a new normal. It seems it's very normal. And generally it is felt that 10 to 20% of the project cost is kept for this, without anybody asking, without making a demand. So it's part of it.
Right.
And so therefore what has happened, some kind of acceptability about this kind of thing. Public funds can be, you can knock off a few rupees, a few crores of rupees. I mean, it's a normal.
Right.
I think this very attitude is so deeply ingrained. Because, for instance, I was told an instance where a senior officers couple of Madhya Pradesh, who were, whose houses were raided and several things came out, probably the matter is sub judice, I would not know. But that particular episode brought out a story that normally contractors and business people, I mean, without anybody asking, they keep certain percentage, even 2% through those clerks who would handle it, without them even making a demand. So the sort of, the point here, you asked about why is it so? The very fact that people have accepted it, those who have to deal with the system, whether it is a businessman or contractors, and in terms they can make some compromises in quality, that this was tolerated, this was allowed by politicians of all hues. So gradually it a thing, such a big monster. So the monster was fed by this very acceptable approach to the issues. Okay, so corruption is a normal, is a fact of life, and nobody is going to ask you questions. You don't feel or consider yourself being accountable. Transparency or no transparency is okay as long as all of us in the system can make money, and that's the larger opinion, within the administration, be it somebody at a junior level, at a subordinate level, or someone at at a higher level. But what sort of institutional mechanisms or institutional solutions are in place, or what sort of solutions are required so that we can check corruption? We have several such measures like the CVC, the CBI, but we are only talking about the mega corruption as far as petty corruption is concerned. And what is the bigger threat, petty corruption or a mega corruption?
In terms of, if you talk about affecting the common citizens, then petty corruption is definitely a major issue. But at the same time, we have to keep in mind that whatever we preach, we should practice also. So at the top, we need to have some kind of transparency, like e-procurement, e-governance needs to be there. But at the same time, at the bottom, you need to have active citizenry and media to play an important role in bringing up those issues. We should not restrain ourselves just to the metros and cities, but go to the grassroots level and come out with the issues that we try to do with this service, because there we go to the villages, go to slums, and interact with the households to understand what kind of difficulties they face. The documentation process takes long. Even if we have, like in Karnataka, why Karnataka came up with such a huge figure of experiencing corruption. We talk about about land records, registration being computerized. But still, if they go there and there are excuses being given, the server is down or computer is not working, then these are daily wagers. So they avoid coming next time to get their work done. Or maybe even they are farmers, they are marginal farmers.
Okay, so you're saying civil society and of course the media also have to play a very strong role in checking and regulating and monitoring the sort of discrepancies that exist in the system. What sort of institutional solutions, in your opinion, Mr. Iyer, must be put in place to fight corruption? Because interestingly, this report says in 2005, judicial services had the corruption rate of 66%. It has now come down to 18%. What explains that?
See, judiciary is one area where it has been difficult to do anything much. I mean, if it has really come down, I would wonder, what could be the reasons. The one obvious reason could be perhaps those who are becoming judges you are getting more quality people who are wedded to ethics. This is one view. But I could be voted out on this. But judiciary is one area where I think people have a lot of grouses.
Right.
But at the same time, since the judiciary is supposed to be, act on a guard on itself, so a lot will depend on what kind of mechanism exists. As of now, I don't see, because the attempts to bring a judicial accountability bill, all that didn't move forward. After all, the Supreme Court judgment.
It's very difficult to understand the reasons which can explain that how within judicial services the corruption came down from 66% to 18%. But also interestingly, your report says that Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu experienced the most corruption in 2016. Himachal Pradesh, Kerala and Chhattisgarh experienced the least corruption in 2016. We've generally lived by this assumption that southern states are comparatively well governed. What really explains high corruption in southern states?
As I said, I just mentioned a little while that even if you have computerization and IT in place, but still if you go there and the people are illiterate or they are not very familiar with this computerization process, they come across these kind of things and they have to pay bribe to get their work done. So not only e-governance, as I said, the active citizenry is very important, and media has to play along with the CSOs, civil society groups, to come up with these issues and bring this issue to the...
Right. Before I close this segment, quickly your comments also on what really should be our strategy ahead in terms of dealing with the sort of corruption that exists in public services.
It should be multi-pronged, not only from one side, but we need to have all the important players to, again, citizens have to, like RTI, usage of RTI Act. What we saw that very little percentage have used RTI to seek information.
Right.
That is a very important tool. One should use it to seek information about whatever development work is happening.
And now with the Supreme Court's latest judgment also on Lokpal, that Lokpal can...
will play an important role in bringing and at least changing the perception and making people aware that it's not the only way to get the work done. The fact of life should change.
Right. The fact of life, corruption of fact of life in India must change. Mr. Iyer, what really should be our strategy? He talked about a multi-pronged approach, a comprehensive approach. But what should threaten us more? Is it the mega corruption? Because in 2010, when we were talking about 2G scam and all the big scams, Commonwealth games, or should we be more bothered about the petty corruption that exists in our day-to-day life?
No, I think whether it is petty corruption or mega corruption, you will have to, put premium on being honest. And that if you can do at all levels, whether it's a politician or it's a contractor, whether it's a bureaucrat, or anybody who is part of the system, if you can put a high value for being honest, and if you can, actually think of ways of, honoring those businesses which are doing an honest job, so then I think that will serve as a disincentive for being dishonest.
Right.
But today what is, the perception is being honest is some kind of, misfortune, you let it fall on yourself. I think that has to change. Because you can have laws being simplified.
But it's a sad paradox. But we are living in a time when we have to incentivize people for being honest. That's something that should be, that is as a matter of virtue should be apparent.
Because you see, when I say you have to incentivize honesty, because you cannot just, because as on date is what? If you are honest, perhaps you have a place in heaven. I think that won't work. You will have to show that if a project can be completed in record time with quality services, let a system be be created where the government pays some money to the businessman for doing a good job.
Okay. And also maybe stringent punishment for people who are actually...
And for those officials who are involved in executing the project, who are overseeing the project, let them be complimented for ensuring, quality work. Because this will need a very radical approach.
Okay, maybe simultaneously instill faith in people who are actually being honest.
Natasha, but creating more institutions to keep watchdog will only increase the scope for, more palms to be greased.
Right, and most importantly, also having a strong criminal justice system, because at a time when there's no fear, you really have to have stringent actions against those who are corrupt, who need to be made accountable, and maybe that can also draw a comparison between those who are honest. And naming and shaming, as you started the program saying, that naming and shaming is extremely important. But again, it's a long fight, and all of us must play a role of a stakeholder and should not allow this. Thanks very much to Mr. Srivastava for joining us in this particular segment on this program. And time now for me to slip into a short break. Next, when we come back on the other side, we'll focus on the civil aviation sector, on the regional connectivity program, the UDAN scheme. Stay tuned.